Well, it's harder to have a better start to a season than that, wouldn't you say?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me right down there at MVP_Ethan. And of course, it is Monday, April 1st. There are going to be no jokes. There are going to be no fools on this show today. I'm not going to do that to any of you. And as usual, on Mondays, we are joined by the wonderful Gary Morgan here on Monday, April 1st, 2024, where in the year 2024 at this current juncture, the Pittsburgh Pirates are an undefeated baseball team, Gary. And if you've been on FanDuel at all, the sponsor of today's show, betting on the Pirates, who were underdogs in every single game of this series, you would probably be very happy walking away with a lot of money this weekend. But Gary, how are you after whatever we were watching? Because it seemed like this series had everything to talk about coming out of it.
Yeah, I'm great, man. It's something that I've never seen. In fact, no living person has ever seen it. Like I think 1903 was the last time they swept a 4-game series to open a season. So, yeah, I mean, how could you complain?
Yeah, there's no really, you can't have complaints. Now, obviously, in the fashion that it was done, I think a lot of us would have preferred for it to be a little less stressful. The 2 extra inning games were definitely the comeback games of the series when they were down 5-2 and 5-0 in those games. But the takeaways for this, I feel like, are almost the same takeaways that I had for opening day when we're talking about the entire series. I did a post-game show on opening day. So did you guys over at the Pirates Fan Forum. And it seemed like the takeaways from everybody were the exact same. This team is built to win close games, Gary. I have been driving this into people's heads ever since opening day when we watched this team just be shut down in the bullpen, be behind early, and have an offense that can come back and win in games. And you saw that multiple times in this series where this bullpen would just enter the game, and it was almost like a sigh of relief. You're like, oh, okay, well, this is the score. This is how many runs the Marlins have, but I don't think they're getting too many more runs after this. I mean, I believe the bullpen left the series with 20 innings pitched and only 2 earned runs on the entire series, or 2 or 3. I can't remember which number it was, but it wasn't bad.
1.
Oh, the bullpen allowed only 1?
Yeah.
In the whole series?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Well, would Bednar's go towards that?
I don't know if that was an earned run, actually. Or no, the home run might have been the only earned run. Or maybe,
I know there was
maybe my stats old.
Well, but it also gets complicated with some of those extra innings ones, because then if they score a run in extras or whatever.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure you're right. I think it was 2, but regardless if
that's the argument we're having for our bullpen, having 20 innings pitched on the series and only giving up 2 or 3 runs, I think we're having a pretty good conversation. But what were some of your takeaways as well, Gary? Because everybody's pretty much heard me say the exact same thing over the last 4 days, because really, I mean, it's been the exact same thing for the last 4 days, in my opinion, as well.
I mean, the takeaways for me are, first, the offense is better. I mean, it just is. You don't feel like you're out of a game when you give up a couple runs anymore. Like, in fact, yesterday at Easter, I'm with family, and they're down 5-0, and everyone's kind of going, oh, well, they didn't want to win this one. And then we got into the next inning, and then the Pirates scored a couple runs to kind of cut into it a little bit. And Bailey Falter figured out how to only give up 1 run over the next 3 innings. And I said, if they're smart and they pull him, I'll take this right now. I'll take this, and I'll say the Pirates will win. Their bullpen will outduel their bullpen, and I think they'll chip away the rest of the game. Well, that's what happened. And that's how you had to feel. And even in that first game, yeah, it went to extra innings. Yeah, it was nerve-wracking. But you never felt like they were out of it. You never felt like there was, unless Luzardo had 9 innings in him, you did not feel like they were going to get shut down. And I mean, to me, that's the big difference. Even as good as Jared Jones was in his outing, that would have been a loss last year. You know,
Oh, yeah.
gave up what, 3 runs, I think it was?
Yeah, it was 3.
Yeah, gave up 3 runs, and that might have been enough last year to take down this team. They would have gotten down and just, I guess we're not going to catch up, you know, or and it's just not what you're seeing this year. You're seeing a barrage of good at bats and good approaches, and for the most part, I think everybody contributed. Even McCutchen, who did, he probably had the worst series he's had in quite some time. Only played 2 games. I think he had 5 strikeouts and 2 walks. He ended up getting an RBI on one of those walks. You know, so even he contributed. Jack Sawinski even contributed. Finally got off the schneid and got a single. And he looked awful this series. But you can survive a couple guys looking awful when you've got 7 out of 9 doing something. So pretty interesting. I don't even think this team's built to beat lefties all that well. No. And that's all they faced. So,
and we'll get into it in a minute, but they're going to face another one this evening, it appears. And I had some notes written thus far on Twitter last night. I mean, you look at some things leaving this series, and a lot of it is what you mentioned. The Pirates already have 9 players with multiple RBIs on the season. 9 players. So that means, hey, you have a full lineup of guys that have already batted runs in for you. They rank 3rd only, and I really say in this junk, like if everybody would have started at day 1, they would rank 1st. But they rank 3rd only behind San Diego and the Dodgers, who have the 2 extra games, with 46 hits. They were hitting the baseball everywhere. The pitching overall, even with the falter start yesterday, ranked 6th in WHIP with 1.08, and they are allowing an opponent batting average of 201, which ranks 4th in Major League Baseball. So that, I mean, you're looking at this team, and again, folks, I'm sure Gary will agree with me when I say this, and this is something he had to teach me when he was first being on this show. It's 4 games. This could go so south so fast. It really could. That's just baseball. But it's very hard for me to have the same feeling that I had in 23, 22, and 21 when I covered this team and say, yeah, I know it's only 4 games, but they're also doing this without key contributors. You look at Colin Holderman and Karma Majinski not even being involved. Jose Hernandez gets his first career save and then gets optioned back to AAA 2 days later. And you mentioned the struggles of some of these guys like Jack Sawinski that struggle against lefties in particular, like O'Neal Cruz. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you, O'Neal Cruz isn't going to face lefties 140 times this year. Jack Sawinski isn't going to face lefties 120-something times this year. They're going to eventually see righties. And I think you mentioned that in one of our groups that we're in. It's like teams are going to have to throw right-handers at them at some point. I mean, you're not going to have a million left-handed pitchers. Miami had the option not to throw a righty against O'Neal Cruz in the opener and decided to do it anyway, and he took him opposite field. But you look at just another thing, too, and this will be a big takeaway that I'll have before we go to the ad break that we'll then get into, is I think one of our bigger questions, Gary, that we had exiting spring training and exiting 2023 might have a pretty clear answer already, but we'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do, folks, we're going to talk about FanDuel and LinkedIn. Well, again, so far, if you have bet on the Pirates in every single game this year, you probably made a lot of money on FanDuel because they were the underdog in every single game against the Miami Marlins and won outright. And the sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on the March Madness Final Four, National Basketball Association, Major League Baseball, NHL, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and, of course, a sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. Try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon because are you struggling to close deals? Well, selling is tougher than ever, and that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. So right now, you could try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/locked on. That is linkedin.com/locked on for a 60-day free trial, and let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Again, just go to linkedin.com/locked on and get started. And folks, don't forget to also check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and Amazon Fire TV. You might see me on there. You might see some other Locked On MLB hosts on there as baseball is fully back. But going back to what the point I was making before the break, and it's something that, again, I understand the season just started, but you even mentioned, Gary, after that first game, that strikeout thing was a tendency that we'd seen in the past, especially last year. But there was something else that I saw that was a positive tendency, specifically from one player in this series where I said, okay, we had questions about this, and it looks like he's answering some of them, and that's Ke'Bryan Hayes. A lot of us have wondered, is that bat from the second half of last year going to translate over to this year? Well, so far, he had 2 hits in every single game of the series. And it's not like he's just getting like false hits or like lucky hits. I mean, he is mashing the baseball around the diamond, pushing it where it needs to go. Now, obviously, had that unorthodox defensive day, I believe, on Saturday. It was either, or was that yesterday?
Yeah,
it was Saturday.
Saturday.
Yes, where he just, I guess, just wanted to have a bad defensive day and get all of his errors out on the season in one day. To which, before I continue at this point, by the way, I love that we got a Gold Glove-esque game from Josh Bell and a terrible defensive game from Ke'Bryan Hayes in the same series. I absolutely love that. That's why baseball is amazing. But Hayes, on the other hand, I mean, you look at the bat that he was swinging this series, having him in the 3-hole, I think, might stick for a while. I mean, if he's going to keep hitting the baseball like this, I don't see how you change that. And keeping Brian Reynolds in front of him, I think, will be huge for that. I think when right-handed pitching starts coming along in the fold, O'Neal Cruz will probably slide into that leadoff spot, which I'd be perfectly fine with. But Ke'Bryan Hayes, I mean, if he keeps hitting the baseball like this, the Pirates have a real two-way player on their hands if he can continue to just keep mashing the baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done well. So I have no complaints whatsoever. I also don't think that he's really been backed by anybody who's doing him any favors. You know, McCutchen has not been threatening. So to pitch to Brian Hayes is really your own foolishness at this point, you know, until the Pirates prove that somebody behind him is going to do something. The other side of that, too, is, you know, Connor Joe has been getting on base and he's been leading off, and Brian Reynolds has been getting on base and he's been batting second. So when Hayes comes up, there's not really room to mess around. You got to go after him. And to his credit, he's found a way to do something with that pitch away that he was striking out on routinely. And he's found a way to get around on balls that are in on him. So, I mean, he's combated everything that people throw at him and looks poised to have a big season. It's been fun to watch so far. I'm excited to see more of it. You're right. I think he could probably hold down the 3-hole.
Yeah. And I think it's something, too, that a lot of people I do know probably panicked a little bit about these lineups over the weekend. There was a lot to say about these lineups. But, I mean, again, you're facing 4 lefties in a row. O'Neal Cruz, we all love him. He just doesn't hit lefties that great. Jack Sawinski does not hit lefties all that great either. One of my biggest gripes on the series, Rowdy Tellez, yeah, his splits against lefties aren't horrible, but that was also when he was hitting 35 home runs. We don't know if he's going to do that yet. Another big takeaway as well, just overall, the starting pitching outside of Bailey Falter was, to me, it was fine, I would say. Jared Jones obviously had the very strong debut, Martin Perez, very good debut as well in a Pirates uniform. Mitch Keller, a lot of people would walk away from that Mitch Keller start on opening day and say that that was a bad start. But that was also one of those starts where Keller could have given up 6 or 7 and kept the Marlins off the board and kept the Pirates in the game in a lot of different stints. And to go back to that Mitch Keller start too, because I didn't get to really talk about it all that much on the show on Friday because I was talking about Perez. Really, that start was defined by misplacement of pitches on 2 strikes and Jake Berger. I mean, a lot of that start that he had to me was very odd. I mean, a lot of people have hinted about the velocity thing and some of his pitches not really being placed correctly, but I also am waiting for that to be an issue. Like, if it's going to be an issue, I'm not going to say it's going to be an issue until like 4 or 5 starts in. And if his velocity is still down 1.5 miles or 2 miles per hour, then I think that's a cause for concern. But as far as the pitching went overall in this series, I think it was great. But especially Mitch Keller, I wanted to preface that and say that I thought his start was fine because it could have been way worse.
Well, I don't think it was fine. I think it was pretty bad for Mitch Keller. It's not what you expect. It's not what you want. No. And if that's what he does, that's not okay. He needs to be better than that. That said, first couple times through the rotation, I'm not really looking for any kind of cumulative, the starters did X, Y, or Z. They're not stretched out. They're not like, for instance, Martin Perez didn't look great, right? He only went 4 innings. He only went 4 innings though. He's not really ready to be Martin Perez yet. You know, Marco Gonzalez, I mean, if he goes 4 or 5 today, I'll probably be pretty satisfied with that, even if he gives up a couple runs. That doesn't mean like that's what I expect out of him every time he goes out, or I expect Mitch Keller to look the same way against Washington on Wednesday. I don't. I expect him to step up and start learning from his mistakes and everything. As far as the velocity goes, he's addressed it. He's been asked about it. He's straight up told people he doesn't care about it. It's not something that he's worried about. He feels fine. I would have to say you got to start looking at what he's doing more as intentional as opposed to some kind of cause and effect type thing, or thinking that his arm's going to fall off, or Oscar Marin's ruining him.
Oh, God.
I think he's just changing some of the things he does. He's fallen in love with the cutter a little bit. I personally think he's done that in a way to cut down on the elbow abuse that his sweeper causes. You know, so I think he's trying to get away with the cutter a little more often. But we'll see how he evolves as the season goes on. I expect him at the end of the year to have some pretty good looking numbers, but I also expect him to have some games where he doesn't look like anything close to an ace like he did, you know, Thursday.
Yeah. And again, like very early season stuff too. I mean, we could be having this conversation in June and it'll be a completely different conversation at that point. But I don't think it's anything really to worry about all that much. But the other big takeaway that we had earlier that's interesting is, albeit Mitch Keller having that bad start, you mentioned it with Jared Jones, that would have been a loss in a year like last year or the year before. That Keller start would have been a loss the year before or the year prior. And that's really, now when I say this, I don't want that to sound like, oh yeah, our starters can always have a bad start and then we'll just win games and come back. No, you want them to have good starts. And I want to see this bullpen, and they've already done it, but I can't wait to see this bullpen have leads, because it's almost going to feel like if they have a 2 or like a multiple run lead in a game, it almost feels like that game is out of reach for the other team at that point. Just based off of how it
probably should feel that way. That's the way this team's built. Yeah. I think you're totally right there. I mean, I would caution people more about the offense than the pitching. I mean, Miami was not at the height of their powers.
No.
That is not the Miami team that went to the playoffs last year. That is not the rotation that they leaned on. It's not anything close to that. So let's maybe pump the brakes on thinking that the offense is just going to always win the day too. Point is, they're built so that the bullpen can stop things wherever they are and hold the fort and give the offense a chance. And as long as the starter has given them a chance, you know, meaning they don't give up 7-8 runs, they should be able to fight their way back into it. I think they're going to win more games like that than they would have last year, and that's probably going to be the main responsibility point for why their record's better this year.
Yeah. And winning those close games could be a big reason why you make the playoffs. The Marlins did it last year, being one of the best teams in 1 to 2 run games, and it resulted in them sliding into the postseason. And maybe the Pirates do the same thing. They do have another NL East team in their way before they get to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on Friday, as they'll take on the Washington Nationals. We'll talk about that series a little bit, take a little bit of a look at it. But before we do that, we're going to talk about Amazon Fire TV. You probably heard me mention earlier that Locked On, like this show, and Locked On Sports Today, are on Amazon Fire TV, your sports destination. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOn Fire TV, because Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live television. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the Final Four, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Not to mention, you get great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOn Fire TV to get your sports destination fix today. And as mentioned, welcome, by the way, to the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. You guys absolutely killed it last week on this show. You guys absolutely loved all the content that we had, from Gary to Peter Pratt of Locked On Marlins to Michael McHenry. You guys loved that episode where we talked about Henry Davis at a pretty good length as well. Always love having all the guests on. Gary will obviously be the Monday guest all the time. Maybe we'll start having some other set-in guests again, like we had Craig Toth on the show way back when, every Thursday. Maybe that's something we do. I'm still looking for a daily Friday show to look at as well. But before we even worry about that, one, I'm going to be in Pittsburgh in 3 days. So I'm excited for that. The weather is going to be a little bit different than what I've had down here in Savannah the last couple weeks, but you're going
to be on another show when you get here too, huh?
Yes, I will be on another show when I get here. I will be on the Pirates Fan Forum this Thursday. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. Obviously going to be at the game Friday. I'm going to be tweeting out all the information about my whereabouts that day. So people that listen to this show, if you want to meet me, I am one of those people where just come up and say hi, because I will talk to anybody and everybody if there's a drink in my hand. So for this Pirates National Series, obviously they play Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, have the day off tomorrow, with it being the Nats home opener. Marco Gonzalez, Mackenzie Gore today. It's going to be Mitch Keller and friend of the Pirates, Trevor Williams, on Wednesday. And Thursday will be Perez and Josiah Gray. So interesting pitching matchups there. Obviously, I think it's nice that you don't have to see all lefties in this series again. Right. You obviously start tonight with Mackenzie Gore, who's a guy the Nationals are probably really hoping finally takes that next step forward. Nationals obviously played the Cincinnati Reds to open up their season. They started 1-2, kind of lost that second game in a very, very gut-wrenching fashion when you have 2 outs and you give up back-to-back home runs. And then, of course, apparently I heard that Jonathan India at-bat was the biggest reason why they even got to that point. So I still think it's early enough where you throw the records out the window a little bit. This Nationals team's interesting. It's a team that I said was going to be scrappy. I think it's a team that has the potential to not finish last in the NL East, or at least be close to not finishing in that position. And they have some guys. I mean, and I believe it, I don't know if you're listening, but I believe it was Selena that posted this on Twitter last night. She posted, "Look what happened the last time we played the Nationals, and I don't want to think about it." I already had thought about it going into this series in DC. But what are your thoughts going into this series, Gary? I mean, I feel like most of them are going to be more on our side of things rather than what we're expecting from the other side.
I mean, the Nationals can hit. I mean, so I think that would be the first thing I would say is don't sleep on their offense. They'll probably score some runs. They got some guys that'll run into it every once in a while, and I think they can put up a decent amount on this staff that still isn't really where you want it to be. Marco Gonzalez is obviously going to be an interesting thing to see. He's going to be a story that unfolds for a month or so here before we can really decide what he is and if he's going to be healthy and contributing. Mitch Keller, you obviously look for him to bounce back. He figures to get a lot of run support facing Trevor Williams. I think that, first of all, the Pirates lefty bats are going to be probably doing some extra caffeine shots and stuff before that game so that they can get up for facing their first righty starter. And what a righty starter to face for them, a guy who had a 5.55 ERA last year. So I think that should be pretty nice for them. And Josiah Gray just absolutely blew up in his first game. He was awful. 4 innings pitched, 15.75 ERA early on. They should be able to do some damage in this series offensively. So if the pitching holds, I like the Pirates' chances. I really do. This is a good series for them. I kind of don't like starting out with two teams that I think they can metaphorically beat on, but I wouldn't roll out them starting 7-0 here, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a chance. I would say that. In this series, I think a lot of you watching this series are going to have kind of the same feeling you had in the Miami series. I think it's going to be a lot of offense. I really do. I think outside of Keller, Perez maybe even too, I think has a better start. But tonight, I think you get a lot of offense at 4:05. I think you're going to get a lot of offense in this series. Talking 7-6, 8-7. I think those are the kind of games you're going to see again. But again, I don't really know the Nationals bullpen all that well, but I would imagine the Pirates bullpen is probably more well-equipped than the Nationals bullpen. And that's going back to that point again. I mean, if it's a 1-0 game or a 7-6 game, I still think you're very confident in this bullpen pretty much against anybody's really at this point.
I am, but I think the Nationals bullpen is probably one of the better in the National League. It's the first place they really built, and I think they can stack up against just about anybody as far as holding the score where it is, despite what you saw in Cincinnati. But that ballpark again, that's fluky sometimes. You don't know what's a home run everywhere. You know what I mean? When it's in Cincinnati. So it's hard to really roll them out from watching that series as to what that bullpen really could be. They were very good last year. I expect them to probably keep games close. Their starting pitching is where it's at for the Nationals. I think that's going to be a struggle for them all season long.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned too, starting with two teams that really they should beat, and they did that in Miami. I mean, when I was going into that Miami series, I just wanted them to split. That's what I was hoping for. I was like, just at least get the split. And then when I was coming into the National Series, I was saying, okay, let's win this one. Now you go into it and you're saying, okay, this is a winnable game. We would like to win this one. And I mean, if they can even, let's say they drop one, whoop-de-woo, they drop one game and go into the home opener against Baltimore at 6-1. I think you walk away from that happy when you start the season with 7 games on the road against anybody and you win 6 of them. And that Baltimore series, and I know it's an early series, depending on how they perform in this National Series, could be a real, is it litmus test? I always get that word wrong. Is that the word for it?
Yes, but I hope they're thinking that every series is that.
So do I.
I don't think this team is to the place where they should be thinking they're above anybody. I would think there's enough veterans in that room to know better. But it is a danger when you start out hot like that. You can start almost walking in, and you want them to expect to win, but you don't want them to walk in just thinking that the win's going to fall in their lap either.
Yeah.
They don't have that makeup, at least from what I'm seeing so far, but that's a letdown series could be in your future if you do that sort of thing.
Yeah, let's hope they don't, as they take on the Washington Nationals Today, Wednesday, and Thursday, they have the off day in between on Tuesday, as they always do with the Northeast home openers, usually having the day off after. Pirates don't have it, though, in their home opener. They are not off the following day. And again, I will be in Pittsburgh this week. It's going to be a very fun time. I'm going to be on the Pirates fan forum, as you mentioned, on Thursday with Jim Stam and Gary Morgan. That's going to be a wonderful time. And I'll actually be doing that from Pittsburgh. So we'll have a show from Pittsburgh, actually, I think for the first time on this podcast on Friday. So that should be very fun. And outside of that, Gary, I mean, you're going to have 5 Thoughts at 5 today, which should be a very fun piece. I'm going to try to get back into some writing this week as well. And ultimately, it's week 2 now of having baseball back. And it's, folks, we still got 158 of these to go. Sorry, I had to do the math in my head. But also, don't forget, follow Gary Morgan on Twitter at GaryBo2007. Follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Thank you guys for tuning into the show, as you always do. We'll see you tomorrow after talking about the Washington Nationals series opener. But until then, folks, see you on the flip side.